South Carolina with a record 11 players sent to the NFL Combine. Will they break their own draft record? And what does this mean for the program moving forward? I tell you what, it means a lot. We talk about all that and more. Locked on Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked on Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked on Gamecocks. I hope everyone's having a fantastic Thursday. We got a great show for you today. Very excited as we move on into the weekend and start talking about one of my favorite events of the year in the next week or so, and that is the NFL Combine. Before we do, I want to say thank you to everyone making Locked on Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we're a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Whew, it's going to be a long episode. We're already out of breath. Remember, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So go place it. Maybe we'll place on some college basketball games this weekend. We'll talk about all that and more. Listen, great episode today. Very excited. We're going to talk. It's something that's right in my wheelhouse. One of my favorite things to discuss. And no, it's not getting a haircut. What is going on here? For those of you listening on audio, good for you. That should be what you're doing at all times because this haircut is out of control. Okay, so here's the deal. The NFL Combine sends out their official invites today around the country. 329 players invited. Some notable omissions. Dan Jackson from Georgia. Warren Brinson from Georgia. There's someone else I'm forgetting that was at another SEC school. Debo Williams. Debo Williams left out, which is so crazy to me. But still, 11 South Carolina players that are going to be invited for the next step in this process of trying to make your dreams come true and get to the NFL draft. Now, why is that a big deal? It's a big deal for a lot of reasons. I'm going to go through this graphic I made earlier so I can go through the total players that were invited. But it's a big deal for a lot of reasons. One, from a personal standpoint, like a personal pride standpoint, anytime you're having double-digit players invited to the NFL draft, the NFL Combine, that's a massive deal. And to put that in perspective, you're not one of 1, 2, 3. If you're one of 7 teams in the country, that had double-digit players invited to the Combine, it also means that you have now put in, this is the most all-time for South Carolina that have ever been invited dating back to 2012. Okay? And now those numbers, they talk about going back to 2012, that's also more than double any other year you've had in the last decade. 2013, you had 7. 2012, you had 6. Those are your previous program highs. You had 11 this year. 4 more than the year where you had Clowney and you had everyone else in that draft class that like, I mean, I'm like a little bit still speechless because it's such an incredible job. Now we're going to get into the big picture stuff here after the first break. But at first I want to say one tremendous job from Shane Beamer and staff getting this many players into the Combine. One, it's an incredible job from the players you've brought in and developed as recruits. And it's also a great mix of players you brought in from the portal and then also developed. I mean, like Kyle Kennard leads the way on that one, right? But here's the list of everyone. Nikki Minwari, O'Donnell Fortune, Tonka Hemingway, DeAndre Jules, Kyle Kennard, Demetrius Knight Jr. I'm telling you, Demetrius Knight Jr. or TJ Sanders are sneaking into the first round. Bam Martin Scott, Raheem Sanders, Rocket Sanders, TJ Sanders already brought up, Joshua Simon, and Torricelli Simpkins. A little bit surprised. Simpkins is the only offensive lineman there. I believe there's multiple other options. I think there's at least 2 other options that could have gone, but Torricelli Simpkins goes. How about the defensive line? How about the fact that you have 4 players from the defensive line that are going? You have 2 from defensive back, and you have 3 linebackers. I'm sorry, two linebackers because they left off Debo Williams, which is crazy to me. That's snub. I mean, this is like a second team All-SEC player 2 seasons ago, and now he's completely off the list. Like that's just it makes no sense to me. But what I'm looking at this with 11 players and where it puts you with the rest of this country, with players from around the country. I mean, when I said you were one of 7 programs, I know that you're thinking because you're a smart audience, like okay, well if it's the other 7, who's it got to be? It's got to be like teams like Bama. Probably teams like Michigan, maybe LSU. Nope. You're ahead of all of them. Miami had 10. You're tied with Ole Miss with 11. Oregon, who was the number 1 team in the country for most of the season, had 1 loss. They had 12. Georgia and Texas, the preeminent power programs in this conference, they both had 14. And Ohio State, who won the effing national championship, had 15. You're on that level. Of not saying winning national championships, but like Miami, think about how much. Listen, let's break this down this way, okay? And just bear with me. Ohio State won the national championship and spent more than $20 million in the portal, okay? Georgia and Texas are 2 programs that continuously have top 5 programs and top 5 recruiting classes every single year. Sometimes, it seems like more often than not, Georgia ends up with the top 2 or number 1 overall class. Oregon, that's another one that spent over $20 million building their roster. Ole Miss was the biggest spender outside of maybe Texas in the SEC last year for their portal class going into this year. Miami, that's another one where we can confirm over $20 million in portal spending. So what you're telling me is this. Out of the 7 teams, and there's 6 others that are not named South Carolina. Out of those 6, I know for a fact 3 of them spent over $20 million in the portal. 1 of them won a national championship. 1 of them had lost 1 game in their last 2 years combined coming into the season. And then there's Texas, who made the college football playoff 2 years in a row and probably spent upwards of 10 to 15 million in the portal as well. And then there's South Carolina. Do you realize how big of a deal it is to be on that line? Like the ability to have that many players from that team. And before anyone sits here and says, oh man, it feels like we underachieved. No, because this is just a sign of things to come. This is just, it's truly what I believe in my heart of hearts, that this is a sign of things to come. Because if you were able to do that before all the NIL money started coming in, if you're able to do that before the $20.5 or $20.1 million in revenue sharing came in, you were able to do all that before you got a marquee potential first round top 10 pick at quarterback, Lenore Sellers, that went berserk last year. You did all that. You're on the same line as Ole Miss, who is a shoe-in to make the playoff. Miami, Oregon, Texas, Georgia, Ohio State. Let's put this in another way as well. Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Oregon. Those are the only 4 teams that had more than you. They all made the college football playoff. All of them made it to the quarterfinals. 2 of them made it to the semifinals. I mean, that's tremendous. That is a tremendous job and pat on the back and feather in the cap for this program. And this is not a blip. You look at the last several years, because you know just as well as I do, next year, there's a lot to replace. But you brought in more and more talent. And you already know 2 years from now, like you got 2 locks, Josiah Thompson, Dylan Stewart. Next year, Lenore Sellers, if he goes early. Like, I mean, the running back you're running from Utah State, like the fact that they were able to do this with this level of talent this year and the recruiting classes that you saw that led to it and the portal class that led to it are not in the same, what's the word I'm looking for, air as the ones you did from this year. It's massive. I'm so jacked up talking about this. All right, we're going to be right back. I'm going to still be jacked up, I'm sure. Before we go to break, I do want to tell you about our friends over here at FanDuel. And FanDuel is a company you guys have heard me talk a lot about. We got some great things going on this weekend. And make sure you are doing them with FanDuel. Now, when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place To get in on that action, and FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet a live fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Now, I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it gives me every moment of the game and gives me that much more excitement while watching every moment of the game. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com, join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, stick with us. We will be right back with more Locked On Gamecocks as we continue next. All right, we're back with more of Me and My Awful Haircut talking about the NFL Combine. Now, listen, here's the thing, too. I don't know if you, you guys need to tell me in the comments, do you care about the NFL Combine? Do you not? I love it. It's one of my favorite things in the world. I get wrapped up into it every single year because it's so exciting. I think the reason for me why I really love watching it is because it's kind of stupid. It's the underwear Olympics. You're getting all these kids who have played their ass off for 3, 4, 5 years, sometimes now 6, 7 with the way COVID year hit. But they get into these into these what do you call it? These Under Armour dry fit, man lingerie, basically. That's a terrible way to phrase it. Terrible. It's all that can come to mind. I'm ashamed. But it's the underwear Olympics. And they get into their Under Armour stuff, and they run the 40, they jump as high as they can, they run as fast as they can, they do all that kind of stuff. And it's you have 3 to 5 years of tape that you have put on tape of how good of a football player you are. But in one weekend, you can make so much more money for yourself and make all your dreams come true because you ran a 40 faster. And I think it's just so damn cool. And listen, I'll just be 1,000% honest with you guys. And a player like me, when I played in college, I was a really good hitter, had no arm, was an okay fielder, and that's about it. But in the off season, I would work my ass off on trying to get faster because I knew it was if playing baseball, if I could drop my 60 from a 7.2 when I was in high school to something that was a 6.6 when I got to my sophomore year or junior year of college, that's a good way to be looked at scouts. Now, spoiler alert, I did not get looked at by scouts. But on combine type days and pro days that we would have, it always made me feel like I stood out a little bit. It's such a fun thing to train for. These guys have been training their butt off, I'm sure, for the last month and a half. They're going to get to go to Indianapolis and try and figure out a way to make their dreams come true just at the drop of a hat and try to be able to how high their 40 or how high their vertical is, how far their standing broad jump is, or how fast their 40 is. I just think it's so much fun. And for the first time in over a decade, South Carolina is one of the preeminent and the prominent, programs that's going to be represented. 11 players being represented. I want to put this into perspective one more time. This is what this looks like in terms of the rest of the conference, okay? This is where the rest of the conference stands. Now, Georgia and Texas have 14. Ole Miss and South Carolina have 11. I could probably just hold my phone up to hear this great-looking graphic that I made. Georgia and Bama, both at 9. I'm sorry, Florida and Bama at 9. LSU at 8. Tennessee at 6. So now you're talking about every team under here. You're almost double, right? Arkansas at 5. Auburn, Mizzou, Kentucky at 4. You almost have more invites than Auburn, Mizzou, and Kentucky combined. Oklahoma and A&M at 3. Now, this isn't a total sign of how good your program is necessarily. Oklahoma or A&M is a better example, but A&M, they're going to be good next year. They're going to have a lot of players. I'm sure they'll get invited in the future, and they've had players in the past. But when you look at what this is, it's just so hard not to be excited for South Carolina because you have 11 this year. That's more than the last 2 years combined. You had 5. You never had more than 5 invited since 2014. Like you've had 5 invited a lot, but these are the numbers going into it. 2014 you had 5, then 15 you had 5, 2016 you had 4, 2017 you had 0. 2018 you had 4, 2019 you had 5, 2020 you had 5, 2021 you had 5, 2022 you've had 3, 2023 and 2024 you both had 5. You had 5 in each. So the cap has been 5. Now the next question becomes, will they be able to get – how many of those players are they going to be able to get drafted? I'll tell you a name that jumps off here to me that's not on here and is going to be an NFL football player, just flat out. Kai Kroger. The fact that he was not invited is crazy to me. There are going to be quarterbacks there that are less accurate than Kai Kroger, and I don't care how that sounds. Jalen Milroe might be one of them. But that's a kid that is going to be – he's going to find a home with what he's put on tape, the stats he's put on, like the stats he's lit up on a stat sheet. Like, he has been a really, really good punter in the best conference in the country for a very long time, and really shown his like how diverse his skill set is because of all the other things he can do besides just kicking a football. I mean, the fact that you got 11 is awesome. Confused how you didn't get 13, flat out. We're not going to sit here and complain about it. I'll save my complaining for something else, I'm sure, just the nature of how I am. But the 11 you got, it could have easily been 13. It could have easily been 13 with D-Bill Williams and Kai Kroger. Now, here's the deal. Now, we talk about how many people you've had invited to the combine. My immediate thought was, how many can you get drafted? How many players can you get drafted? Because that is what brings kids in from a recruiting standpoint and the transfer portal. It's like, how do I get to the next level? It's awesome what NIL has done for these kids and the ability to make money while you're in college and make money for your name, image, and likeness and all that kind of stuff. Everyone knows, in the grand scheme of things, what makes the most money is getting to the league and getting that first contract and then hopefully a second contract after that. That's how you set yourself up for life. Not by getting a couple $100,000 if you're lucky in college. It's by getting an NFL contract and hopefully a second NFL contract after that. That's it. Everyone knows that. So getting to the league has always been the best way to make money. That's one of the things you hear Saban talk about all the time. It's like, we didn't pay players. Sure. But like the whole thing about we didn't pay players because our best advertisement was getting them to the league. Now, I will tell you this. I can tell you numbers from that program specifically, which we're not going to get into today. But I will tell you that the one thing from what Saban's talking about that is truthful is there was a massive Saban discount, especially when NIL started, which was guys like Caleb Downs, a safety that came to Alabama, Julian Sayin, the kids, they're both at Ohio State now. But you talk to like anyone close to their recruitment around their family and saying like, man, he was able to get them to go land at Bama for a much, much bigger discount than they were getting at other places. Like the number that Julian Sayin, I think, got was $200,000 as a quarterback, which this is before the market went boom, right? But I believe he got a $200,000 paycheck or $280,000 to go there. And part of that was because it was like, he's the last quarterback recruit that Saban ever signed. And Caleb Downs, same way. When he was at Bama, he was not getting $1.1 million. The moment his name entered the portal, that's a $1.1 million player. But he wasn't getting that at Bama because people wanted to go play for Saban because he was putting people in the NFL. No one's ever going to match what he did putting players in the NFL. But by getting up to near 10 players, that's a good start. Now think about this, okay? I can tell you, shoot, I should have pulled this up beforehand. I can tell you off the top of my head, when Georgia won the national title in 2021, the following year, so the 2022 draft, they had 15 players drafted. The following year after that, they won another national title in 2022. In the 2023 draft, they had 10 players drafted. You are knocking on the door of double-digit players being drafted. Just because you have 11 players invited to the combine does not mean that you're going to necessarily have 11 players drafted. But when you look at the history of South Carolina and the players that they've had drafted, the most they've ever had is 9. Most they've ever had is 9. I am fingers crossed you can break that. Partially because it's stupid. It's partially because you want to improve on it, right? But the current record is 9, and that was set in the 1954 NFL draft. I think we all remember that 1954 NFL draft, don't we? I mean, come on now. You had 360 total players drafted in 30 rounds. How miserable was that draft? Like, how awful was that draft process, do you think? One, you might have had players that didn't get drafted in the NFL because it took so long for them to find out they were drafted. They might have been drafted to Korea. There's that. 2, 30-round draft process? Ugh, that sounds terrible. But more recently, 7 former Gamecocks were taken in both the 2009 and 2013 drafts. Now, when I look at that, I look at these 7 players, you can definitely break that record. Now, the 11 players that you have that are being invited to the combine, again, I want to point this out. That does not mean they're all going to be drafted. Remember, there's 329 total players that are being invited to the combine. I believe there's only 258 players drafted. I believe that's the number. It's right around the 250s. It's 7 rounds, right around 250-something players. So it does not mean that every single player is going to get drafted. I'm looking at the historically speaking, and I just closed it out. Good for me. Okay. Bear with me here. Historically speaking, looking at the draft, okay, in the 2012 and 2013 draft, 13 you had 7 players drafted. 2012 you had 6. Now 2014, even with Jet Evans and Clowney, you had 2 players, him and Bruce Ellington. But you talk about the year before that with DJ Swearinger, God, my favorite player of all time. God, I love DJ Swearinger. Ace Sanders, Marcus Lattimore, Devin Taylor, Devontae Holloman, TJ Johnson, Justice Cunningham. 3 of the 7 players you had were drafted in the 6th and 7th round. 3 of the 7 players you had drafted were drafted in the 4th round. So 6 and 7 were drafted in the 4th round or later. You had no first-round draft picks. I want to talk about, when we come back, the comparison of what that looks like now, because it's night and day. Stay with us. We're going to close out this show. I appreciate you guys joining us along. Locked On Gamecocks will continue next right after this. Okay. So let's get into this just real quick. Now, the concern you have here trying to break this record, not concern, there's no concern. 2023, you had 5 players drafted. You've had that happen a couple times. But if you talk about getting into double digits, now you're talking about in that rare air of Michigan last year, Texas last year, Bama several times having double digits, Georgia having the back-to-back 10-plus draft picks. I mean, that is a program-changing thing that can happen. That is not a blip. That is a program-changing thing. When you start talking about being able to go into a recruit's home and say, yep, we had 12 players drafted in my first 3 years, and then we had 10 in my 4th, going in my 4th. 2022, 2023, 2024, we had 12 players drafted. We had a total of 1 first-round draft pick. That was Xavier Legette with the very last pick of the first round, right? And we had only 2 of those 12 that were drafted in – I'm sorry, let's move back. It's 3 of those 12 that were drafted in the first 3 rounds. That's it. 9 of the 12 were in the 5th round or later. That includes Spencer Rattler, right? I mean, that's Kevin Harris, Nick Muse, just won a Super Bowl, by the way. Congrats on Nick Muse going viral once again for being I love Nick Muse. Going viral for his shotgunning with Saquon Barkley and getting on the Fallon show with that video. But you start looking at some of these players and it's like, there's some good players. Kevin Harris was a really good player for you at South Carolina. He's a 6th-round pick. He's been in a couple spots. I think now. I know he got drafted by New England. I think he's been multiple places. I believe. I could be wrong. But you look at that and you think, man, there's some players on there that you just like that did really well in college, but you don't know how long. I hate to say this, but you don't know how long their NFL career is going to be. Having more players being able to put into the NFL, having more pictures to put up in the wall facilities, more names to go up on the plaques around the facilities, that's a huge deal. It also means you're like, not only that whole thing is cyclical. It doesn't mean that you're only just putting more kids in the league. Now you have kids that are like wanting to invest back into your program and say like, yeah, this blank changed my life. Like this crap changed my life, man. Like you want to go play elite college football for a coach that will go to war for you and that you want to go to war for him in one of the best environments in the entire effing country, in the best conference in the country. Go to Columbia, South Carolina. Go make your dreams come true. That's how big of a deal this is. And I hate to wax poetic about it. I mean, I really don't, because I love being dramatic, and you guys know that. But you look at some of these names, man, and I'm looking at Shai Smith and Israel Mukuamu and like that defensive secondary that you had, in 2021 with him and J.C. Horn. Obviously, Horn's a first rounder. Some of these other guys, Zach Pickens, a third rounder, I think he's a former 5-star, and the defense like that. Now you can start also looking at people in positions and saying like, hey, if you want to go get drafted, it's all. If you want to go play, remember a couple of years ago, it was like, you want to go play quarterback, win a Heisman Trophy, and get in a first-round draft pick? Go to Oklahoma. Like, go to Oklahoma. Look what they did with Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield. Who's that little one? Kyler Murray. Like all those dudes. Now you can start looking at South Carolina and saying, like, you want to go get drafted? You want to go play the next level? Go play for Clayton White. Go line up on his defensive line. Go line up in that secondary. And then go make your dreams come true. All of it is such a big deal. It starts here in Columbia, South Carolina, and it continues next week in Indianapolis, and I can't wait. That is all for today's show. I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of your Thursday night. Appreciate you guys, and we will talk to you all later. Go Cox.